Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. The province announces that elective surgeries at hospitals in and around the Calgary region have been postponed. We will explain why. And we hear from the federal party leaders who discuss vaccinations, gun violence, and making cell phone bills more affordable.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The Alberta government announced today additional funding to increase healthcare capacity. Health Minister Tyler Shandro says the extra money will help reduce pressure on hospitals during the fourth wave of the pandemic.
Today, we're adding resources for home care and more supports for residents in our continuing care facilities, with the goal of moving patients out of hospital and into more appropriate care settings. Now, first, I'm pleased to announce today that the Government of Alberta will provide an additional $22 million over 2 years to increase pay for certified healthcare aides who are working in contracted home care agencies. And this is going to support retention of current staff and as well help to attract new people and increase capacity in our home care system in Alberta.
Alberta Health Services says it is postponing all scheduled elective surgeries at Calgary and area hospitals and many outpatient procedures for the remainder of the week. It says the move is necessary to support critical care during the fourth wave of COVID-19 pressures. Our province reported 18 new COVID-19 related deaths on Wednesday, which is the highest one-day count since January. Officials also reported 1,166 more COVID-19 cases. A group of Alberta doctors say our province's healthcare system may crumble if the government does not strengthen public health measures. Reports say intensive care units are now operating at 87% capacity, even as the province added more beds. Physicians with the advocacy group Protect Our Province say staffing challenges and limited restrictions to curb the spread of COVID-19 have created more of a dire situation. Some doctors are calling on the province to consider vaccine passports and a short lockdown to calm the growing fourth wave, which includes the Delta variant. Now we're updating a story we first brought you yesterday on Bridge City News. Alberta Finance Minister Travis Taves released a statement calling for a wage freeze for the first 3 years for healthcare workers and a wage increase in years 4 and 5. The United Nurses of Alberta shot back, calling the statement by Taves misleading. The UNA says Alberta Health Services is asking healthcare workers to take a 2% wage cut for UNA members. 1% will be added in the final few years by the employer.
I think Minister Taves implied that they, in good faith came to the table and negotiated and are looking to achieve some really positive outcomes when that's not necessarily what we've seen to date. The fact that there are these massive concerns around recruitment and retention of nurses at this point in time. The idea that a solution would continue to entail rollbacks is completely disingenuous.
The UNA expects to meet with a mediator on September 10th to go over all of the contract details. Calgary-based WestJet says all of its employees will be required to be fully vaccinated against COVID-19. The airline says staff must meet the requirement by October the 30th, and the airline will not be providing testing as an alternative to vaccination. The company says protecting the health and safety of its employees and guests is its #1 priority. The company says it will evaluate and accommodate employees who are unable to get vaccinated against the novel coronavirus, either through medical or other exemptions. Liberal leader Justin Trudeau hit the campaign trail, chatting with healthcare workers in Ottawa. He says if Canadians want to travel, they must be vaccinated.
If you want to get on a plane or a train in the coming months, you're going to have to be vaccinated. It's not a punishment so much as it is a reward for people who've done that, and to reassure them that when they travel, and if we're traveling with our 7-year-old, we're not worried that they're sitting across the aisle from someone who chose not to get vaccinated. That's not fair. We shouldn't be putting the people, almost 80% of Canadians who did the right things, at risk.
Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole was also on the campaign trail, discussing how his party would make internet and cell phone bills more affordable for Canadians. O'Toole says the biggest reason for the high cell phone bills right now is simply a lack of competition.
We need more players in the Canadian market to help improve wireless choice and affordability for consumers. But Canada currently bans foreign companies from competing here, leaving Canadians with limited choice and higher prices. Canada's Conservatives will allow foreign companies from places like Europe and the United States to offer cell phone and internet service here. We'll let in companies from countries that allow our companies to compete in their markets.
Federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh was in Toronto discussing his party's plan for fighting gun violence in Canada, especially in our country's major cities.
What we're proposing is we would support a mandatory buyback of assault weapons. It's something Mr. Trudeau had said he would do. It's something that advocates have demanded, and Mr. Trudeau backed away from that commitment. We would bring in a mandatory buyback so that we could absolutely ban these assault weapons. They should be banned, and that mandatory buyback would help us get there. In terms of stopping the flow of weapons, what the mayors have outlined is what we've found as well, is that the largest quantity or the biggest proportion of weapons that are coming illegally into Canada are coming across the border. So we need to invest, and what we're proposing to do is invest more resources and staffing and human resources into our border security to make sure that we are doing everything we can to stop the flow of those weapons.
Lethbridge police have charged 4 people in connection with a bike theft ring here in our city. The investigation was sparked by an increase in bike thefts, not only with those left unattended on our city streets, but also more expensive models stolen during break-ins. A number of people from Lethbridge face a total of 13 charges. 41-year-old Corey Crowshoe, 24-year-old Jimmy Badman, and 2 others face charges of theft under $5,000 and mischief also under $5,000. 26-year-old Brendan Eagle Plume also faces a wide range of charges, including possession of stolen property under $5,000. And 40-year-old Jessica Eaglespeaker faces 3 counts of failing to comply with release order conditions. The 4 have been released from custody and face court dates at the end of this month and in November. The Lethbridge Legion announced that a Veterans Wellness Check program will be held at their facility this weekend. The current situation in Afghanistan has been an ongoing topic that will be discussed. As Micah Quinn explains now, a local veteran who was deployed in Afghanistan says he's had to deal with PTSD since he left the armed forces.
Brandon Gorham is a sergeant-at-arms for the Colehurst Legion. He served in the Canadian Forces for 6.5 years and was stationed in Afghanistan for Canada's final tour of the country in 2014. Gorham says a particularly scary situation while he was in action in Afghanistan triggered his PTSD.
In my particular case, I just missed a suicide bomber. He hit the convoy immediately behind ours, and which is the cause of my PTSD. And thankfully, we were lucky. There were so many chances that they could have hit us and they didn't.
Gorham says the decision by the United States government to pull their troops out of Afghanistan and the subsequent takeover by the Taliban was poorly planned.
Which is bringing a lot of us veterans to question, was it worth it? Was our sacrifices worth it? Was the mission a success?
The upcoming event is meant to get veterans out of the house and connect with other veterans to chat and help them access support programs.
For example, OSIS, or Military Family Resource Center. Coming from that perspective, I'm the OSIS peer helper, the new OSIS peer helper for Lethbridge and area. OSIS is the Operational Stress Injury Social Support. The idea was to have other veterans as peers actually walk guys through. And it's just, we show up for coffee, have a check-in, see how everybody's doing. If you don't want to talk about your PTSD or anything, that's completely fine. If you just want to talk about the weather or COVID or whatever, go for it.
The first annual Fireteams Partner Check-In will take place at the Lethbridge Legion on September 11th from 2 to 5 p.m. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
The Lethbridge Hurricanes are back in action this weekend as they kick off their training camp ahead of the 2021-2022 season. As Carson Marsouk explains now, the training camp roster is made up of 58 rookies and veterans eyeing up a spot on this year's squad.
Following a shortened season last year due to the pandemic, the Lethbridge Hurricanes opened up their 2021-2022 training camp on Thursday. Veteran player Logan Barloggi says he's excited for the new group of guys to hit the ice once again.
It's exciting for them. I think obviously there's a bit of nerves, but it was good to have a little practice this morning and kind of just get the nerves out, and I think they're feeling better about it now, so I think we'll have some good games tonight and tomorrow.
The 58-man roster includes 7 goaltenders, 17 defensemen, and 34 forwards who are split into 3 teams throughout the weekend. For rookies Noah Chadwick and Logan Wormwald, this year's training camp is the first time the duo has been in Lethbridge since being drafted. With limited ice time for the players, Chadwick says he spent much of last season and the summer focusing on himself ahead of training camp.
Well, we were fortunate enough to be able to practice with our midget team. Like we still, although we got shut down, we were still able to work out and practice a few times a week, which was great. So I just did everything I could last year in the summer to prepare myself for the season.
Wormwald adds it was tough at first, but he was able to work on his own game throughout last season.
It was tough for sure to not play any games for 18 months. It's just been practices over and over, working on my game.
Hurricanes head scout Robert McLaughlin says although players didn't have a full season, the skill level is still top-notch.
The skill level's been great. I don't think overall the year of skill development and skating really hurt anybody.
Players are excited to welcome fans back this season. However, masking will be mandatory for anyone entering the arena.
I think the whole team's excited, to get fans back in. I know the fans are excited. Talking to my billets, they're pretty excited to get back in the rink.
The Kings will begin the 2021 preseason on September 17th against the Medicine Hat Tigers before they hit the ice for their home opener on October 1st. For Bridge City News, I'm Carson Marsouk.
The Canadian Country Music Association says the Canadian Country Music Hall of Fame is relocating to Calgary from Merritt, BC. It'll be housed at the National Music Centre. The association says its collection of artifacts, including Ian Tyson's saddle and rope to an early guitar from Anne Murray, will be on permanent display. Other memorabilia includes Stompin' Tom Connor's stomping board and a red evening gown worn by Shania Twain during the 2018 CCMA Awards. A quarter of the beds in a medical unit in a Manitoba hospital between Winkler and Morden are closed due to a nursing shortage. Officials say Boundary Trails Hospital is experiencing what it calls nursing vacancy challenges like many other hospitals in the province. 10 beds in the 40-bed medical unit are being temporarily closed. The hospital serves a population area of around 50,000, including Winkler and the region of Stanley. We are getting closer to a day that changed the world forever, 9/11. Close to 3,000 people died from the terrorist attacks on September 11, 2001. Their stories endure at the 9/11 Memorial and Museum, where personal artifacts help memorialize some of those who died.
History happens to people, and people make history. This was something that targeted everyday people. We were not, generals. We were not a sworn enemy of anybody. These were people who were going to work, flying. We knew that families, the people that had lost a loved one that day, were going to need to have a place, have a way to remember the person that never came home from work, never came home from a flight.
So Jupiter was just a lover of life. He put his whole heart into what he did. He put his whole heart into his relationships. This is why anniversaries are hard, because I don't think that there's a day that goes by that I don't think about him, or that I don't think about what happened to him. And our lives together, and who he was, and what he meant to everyone that knew him. Jupiter was a banquet manager at Windows on the World. One thing I donated was a wine set that had a corkscrew and a wine topper in it. It was from an actual event at Windows on the World. He loved his job. He loved what he did. He was very good at it.
Well, with an event like September 11th, which is a mass homicide, a mass trauma, it's very hard not to speak in statistical terms. 2,977 people died, nearly 3,000 people. Each person who makes up part of that tally was an individual who lived a life.
Must be tough. The White House welcomed news that around 200 people, including Americans, left Afghanistan on a commercial flight out of Kabul. Officials say this is the first such large-scale departure since U.S. and NATO forces completed their withdrawal over a week ago. White House officials say the Taliban has been, quote, businesslike and professional.
I would note that in that statement, what we were announcing was the fact that a Qatari Airlines flight successfully landed in Qatar with American citizens, legal permanent residents, and Afghans on board who joined us in our fight over the last several years. We wanted to note that the Taliban was cooperative in facilitating the departure of these American citizens and legal permanent residents from HKIA. We promised we would get American citizens out. We promised we would get legal permanent residents out. We promised we would get our Afghan partners out. And we promised we'd press the Taliban to get them out. And that's exactly what we did. We are here to celebrate the return of American citizens who wanted to leave Afghanistan, of legal permanent residents, of Afghans who fought by our side, to Qatar successfully on a Qatari Airlines flight.
The summer-like weather continued for our region today, but more fall-like temperatures are on the way for southwestern Alberta. Full weather details are on deck. The summer-like conditions continue for our region here in southwestern Alberta, and here's hoping they last at least until the end of October. Tonight, just a few clouds developing with a low near 12. Friday, increasing clouds developing with a high near 24. A low-pressure system returns on Saturday, bringing more clouds and a high of only 20. Sunday, overcast with a high of 19. Monday, a mixture of sun and cloud and a high of 18. Tuesday, mainly cloudy with a temperature expected near 23. Wednesday, a mixture of sun and cloud and a high of 19. Now the average high for this time of year is 21 degrees and an average low of 6. The highest temperature on this date was recorded in 1981 at 32 degrees, and the record low was a chilly -1 in 1959. Sunrise was at 6:59, sunset 7:58. Let's see how Friday's shaping up across our home and native land. Victoria should be partly cloudy with a high of 21, mainly sunny and 22 degrees for Vancouver. A mixture of sun and cloud and 19 for Calgary, mainly sunny and 21 degrees in Edmonton. A chance of showers and 23 degrees for Regina on Friday. Rain and 21 for Saskatoon. A good chance of thunder showers and 26 for Winnipeg. In the central part of the country, expect light showers and 22 degrees in Toronto. Rain and 20 degrees in Ottawa. Partly cloudy and 19 degrees for Montreal. In the Maritimes, Fredericton, New Brunswick had a rainfall warning today. Tomorrow, much of the same with a high near 18. Periods of rain or drizzle in Halifax, Nova Scotia with a high of 20. Showers and 22 degrees in Charlottetown, PEI. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, expect increasing clouds with a high of 21.
Today's weather is brought to you, rain or shine, by the Gym in the North. Top-notch equipment and customized classes in Lethbridge's North End.
WestJet says vaccinations are the best line of defense against COVID-19. The airline says it will require all of its employees to be fully vaccinated by October the 30th. The Calgary-based company says it will not be providing testing as an alternative. It says, however, that it will evaluate and accommodate employees who are unable to be vaccinated against COVID-19 due to medical or other exemptions. Revenue was up, but travel company Transit AT is reporting a loss of over $138 million for its third quarter. That compares with a loss of just over $45 million in the same quarter last year. The Montreal-based company says revenue grew from $9.5 million a year ago to $12.5 million in this year's third quarter. Transat began a gradual resumption of flying on July 30th after pandemic restrictions forced it to suspend operations. Dollarama had a pretty solid second quarter, bringing in profits of $146.2 million. That is up from $142.5 million in the same quarter last year. The retailer says sales in the 13-week period that ended August 1st totaled $1.03 billion, which is up from $1.01 billion last year. But comparable store sales fell 5.1% after Ontario banned the sale of non-essential products for the first 5.5 weeks of the quarter. With the doors opening on 13 net new stores in the quarter, Dollarama now operates 1,381 stores. Empire Co., the company that owns Sobeys and Safeway, says its first quarter came in at $7.6 billion. That is up from the $7.4 billion in the same quarter last year. Sales got a boost from the acquisition of Longo's and higher fuel sales due to increased consumption. Company officials say earnings came in at $188.5 million in the quarter, which ended July 31st. That compares with a profit of $191.9 million last year, when the Nova Scotia-based company benefited from a large real estate transaction, which was partly offset by a lump sum payment related to collective bargaining in Alberta. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 36 points on the day to finish at 20,705. The Dow was down 151 points to 34,879. The S&P 500 was down 20 points to 4493, and the Nasdaq was down 38 points on the day to 15,248. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down $1.16 to 68.14 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 12 cents to 5.03 US. Gold was up 3 cents to 17.94.62 US an ounce, and silver was even at 24.04 US an ounce. Wheat is at $400 per metric ton, barley's at $392, canola's at $845, and corn is at $423 per metric ton. Live cattle were up 65 cents to 123.75. Feeder cattle were down 3 cents to 159.25, and lean hogs were down $1.90 to 85.48. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 78.95 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Alberta Health Services says it is postponing all scheduled elective surgeries at Calgary area hospitals and many outpatient procedures for the remainder of the week. It says the move is necessary to support critical care during the fourth wave of COVID-19 pressures. Our province reported 18 new COVID-19 related deaths on Wednesday, which is the highest one-day count since January. Officials also reported 1,166 more COVID-19 cases. Now, do you believe in UFOs? Do they exist? Or are those unidentified flying objects simply government experiments? Dr. Hugh Ross from Reasons to Believe gives us his thoughts next. But first, here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Here's today's Bridge City News community calendar. Coulee Fest is back at Lethbridge College on Saturday, September 18th. This year, Coulee Fest will feature live music, family entertainment, food trucks, a marketplace, and a showcase of all that Lethbridge College has to offer. Admission is free. For details, visit lethbridgecollege.ca. Get out and explore nature. The Helen Schuler Nature Center is offering guided 1-hour field trips for all ages. Visit lethbridge.ca/things to do. Click on Nature Center and follow the events page, where you'll find a list of featured tours that will introduce you to amazing plants and animals found right here in Lethbridge. Cost is $35. Book online for your tour today. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
Well, recently we've seen headlines informing us that during the COVID pandemic, there have been an increase in UFO sightings. The U.S. government has even promised to deliver a report to the public on this. Are these conspiracy theories? Are they military tests? Or could there be something outside of our known universe? Joining us from Southern California is Dr. Hugh Ross, the founder and president of Reasons to Believe, an organization dedicated to integrating scientific fact and biblical faith. Welcome to Bridge City News, Dr. Ross. So great to have you back on.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, well, this is actually a topic that I am very fascinated by. So with all of these recent UFO sightings, in your opinion, Dr. Ross, is there any validity to these?
Well, I think there is a validity to it. I mean, I wrote this book, Lights in the Sky on Little Green Men, with two of our colleagues here at Reasons to Believe on UFOs back in 2002. What's happening today is not just the United States, but several governments around the world has said they're going to release their classified documents on UFOs. But they've already released quite a lot. And I'm anticipating that the new releases are simply going to affirm what's already been released in the past. Namely, that there's millions of UFO sightings being reported, and most of them can be naturally explained, or military events, or they could be a hoax. But there's a 1% residual, and this is what's got the public fascinated. But what I've seen in my own experience of processing UFO reports is that where you got multiple observers in different sites, where you can actually triangulate the path of the UFO going through the atmosphere. There are times when they're recorded at moving at 15, 18,000 miles per hour. But as these observers see them going through our atmosphere, they see no heat friction and no sonic boom.
Right.
And there's 2,000 instances where these things have been observed going through the atmosphere and crashing into the earth. And you go to the crash site, the ground is depressed. There's a shallow crater. If there's snow, the snow is melted. Vegetation is damaged. But when you investigate the site, there's no debris, there's no artifacts. If this was an actual physical craft, there would be debris that you could actually pick up. In this case, there's nothing. But you do see that something has happened because
Right.
something depressed the ground, something melted the snow and damaged the vegetation.
Could it be a meteorite?
Well, if it's a meteorite, you're going to find bits and pieces of the meteor. And when
Okay.
a meteorite goes through the atmosphere, you see a bright glow. There's heat friction. And if the object is moving faster than the speed of sound, you're going to get a sonic boom. The fact that there's no sonic boom, no heat friction, and at the site there's nothing to recover tells us we're dealing with something that definitely is real, but it's not physical. These things violate the laws of physics. And what's being revealed in the US reports are naval pilots recording these UFOs moving at thousands of miles per hour and making sharp right angle turns. A physical object can't do that. If you make that sharp right angle turn, it's going to do damage to the craft, and any being on board would be destroyed if they're physical.
Oh,
So again, we're dealing with non-physical reality.
right.
Now, when I was a graduate student at the University of Toronto, I briefly had as a professor Carl Sagan. He was extremely dismissive of UFOs, says they absolutely don't exist. There's nothing to them. But he had the worldview that there's nothing beyond physical reality. As a Christian, I believed in non physical reality. So that explains why I take the UFO data seriously and why people like Carl Sagan do not. Because God created this universe, He created it from beyond space, time, matter, and energy. There is reality beyond the physical universe. And the Bible tells us that God created two distinct species of intelligent life. We human beings that are constrained by the laws of physics and the space-time dimensions of the universe, and angels that are not constrained by our physics and not constrained by the cosmic space-time dimensions. So what we document in this book is that we're dealing with an angelic phenomena. They are intelligent beings. They're coming to us from different dimensions. And I'm not alone in drawing that conclusion. I've known of 6 physicists who, like me, have devoted more than 10 years to studying the UFO phenomena, where we all agree, as I say, we're dealing with a transdimensional or an interdimensional phenomena. And therefore, these are not beings from a distant planet. They're not beings like us. They're beings from beyond the universe itself that are coming into our realm. And this has always been with us. I mean, UFOs are not new, they've been around for thousands of years. What's interesting is they seem to keep pace with our technology. So 100 years ago, people were reporting UFOs as slow moving dirigibles in the atmosphere. World War II, they were the Foo Fighters that were moving at 700 miles per hour. Today, they're being reported at moving at 18,000 miles per hour. And then when people have messages from these so-called beings,
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
well, it was Alan Hynek, the American astrophysicist, who coined the terms close encounters. And what he meant by that is where you get less than 500 feet away from a UFO encounter. And a close encounter of the third kind is where there's communication going on from the UFO being and the human being. And they too have been changing their story over time. 100 years ago, the message was, we're from the backside of the moon. And by about 50 years ago, they said, well, people don't understand. Life's not possible on the backside of the moon. So they said they were from Venus. And when the lay public became aware of how hot it is in the surface of Venus, they said they were from Mars. Well, now their story is they're from a distant planetary system. So they keep changing their story. But I think what's most fascinating to me as an astrophysicist and as a Christian is there's actually documented cases where the UFO being puts the human being into a trance. And when they're in a trance, they do automatic writing. It's like they take dictation from the being. And probably the most famous example of that is the Arantia book. It's about 4,000 pages long, all messages communicated to this automatic writing, but about a third of the total content is denying the deity of Jesus Christ. So that's why we conclude there's a deceptive motivation behind these UFO beings. And moreover, when they do have close contact with humans, the effects are always deleterious. It's never beneficial. The best you're going to come away from in these encounters is recurring, terrifying nightmares. What's the worst case? You get killed by the incident. Many people have been injured. Some have even been killed. So this is not a friendly encounter. They mean us harm and they mean to deceive us, and they seem to have a motivation to spiritually deceive us. And that's also what's interesting about my fellow physicists. As far as I know, I'm the only Christian that's actually dedicated research onto this as a physicist. But the other six I mentioned, they all agree with me that we see here is a one-to-one correspondence with witchcraft, the occult, and demonology. And we talk about in this book, this is a testable scientific hypothesis. If you will close all the doors to occult activity in your life, that will be the end of your UFO encounters. On the other hand, if you begin pursuing the occult, these things are going to happen to you. And I went to Russia when the communists were still in control, the old Soviet Union. And that was a time when the Soviet government was sponsoring research on occult physics in an attempt to develop new weaponry. And what I observed when I was speaking there in the Soviet Union is a very high percentage of the population, and especially the scientists, who are having multiple UFO encounters. Today, that's virtually gone because the climate has changed. But you also see that around the world. Where do you see the highest UFO encounters? Equatorial Brazil, you see it in France, but these are regions of the world where a lot of people are involved in the occult.
Well, I think they're happening everywhere. Like there's really no place on Earth that they haven't been spotted.
That's true, but that's because everywhere in the world, you got at least some people that have connections to the occult. I mean, what I've noticed here in the United States, where we see the highest incidence is Hawaii and Alaska. But that's where you got the highest percentage of people involved in the occult.
Okay.
So the fact that we see a direct correlation between occult involvement and UFO encounters, I think affirms that indeed this 1% residual that defies physics and yet is real, fallen angels are behind that phenomenon.
Okay, so you're saying that they're demons. So you, as an astrophysicist, you mentioned that you went to Caltech. You don't believe that in the entire universe that there couldn't possibly be another planet with other humans or other beings on them?
Well, I think it's possible that God may have created life on another planet. I can tell you as an astronomer, we've yet to see even a star that could possibly support a planet orbiting it in which advanced life is possible, other than our own star, the sun. Everywhere we look in the universe, so far, all we see are conditions that are highly hostile to advanced life. But one of the chapters I put in Lights in the Sky and Little Green Men is why it's impossible for physical beings like us to traverse interstellar space. Interstellar space is not empty, it's filled with particles. And if you move your spaceship at, say, 10% the velocity of light, you'll do damage to your spaceship before you get to another planetary system.
Yeah, but we're also talking about human spaceships too, right?
Right, but I mean, what we've discovered in astrophysics is yes, we can send spaceships to nearby stars. In fact, we have a plan to send spaceships to Alpha Centauri, the nearest star. But we realize the spaceship cannot be larger than 10 centimeters. If we make it bigger than 10 centimeters, it will be destroyed before it gets to even the nearest star. In fact, the plan is we're going to send 1,000 spaceships, each of them about 10 centimeters across, and we expect a half to 2/3 of them to be destroyed on the way there. But if 100 or so make it, we're going to actually be able to learn a lot about the planets that are orbiting the nearest star. So it's an exciting astrophysical venture, but the idea of sending a rabbit, or let alone a human being, to another planetary system, it violates the laws of physics. Angels can do it, humans can't.
It sounds very dangerous.
When you're moving at, say, 10% of velocity of light, you've got E equals mc squared working against you. And so you get a lot of energy being transferred to your spaceship, and every little particle that hits will do some damage. And you're traveling, say, 10 light years. Basically, any spaceship bigger than about 10 centimeters across will be completely destroyed before it gets there. That's why we only send small ones, and that's why we send a whole bunch of them, because we know interstellar space is a dangerous place.
Oh, it's so fascinating too, though. What kinds of experience have you personally, can you maybe share with us any kinds of experiences that you've personally investigated, Dr. Ross?
Yeah, I've never seen a UFO myself, one of these residual UFOs, but I've been processing literally thousands of UFO reports. And it's because I was an amateur astronomer before I became a professional astronomer. So I was always assigned the task to deal with the UFO reports because I had a good knowledge of what the night sky looked like. So I could kind of sift out what's the planet Venus or the Pleiades, or what I call the chandelier effect. I would always ask them, okay, you saw 6 glowing globes hovering over the horizon. Was there a pane of glass between you and what you were seeing? They say, well, why did you ask? I says, well, there's a chandelier behind you. It's going to appear as 6 floating globes on the horizon. So that's how I would kind of help people understand, no, you really weren't seeing a residual UFO.
Right.
But I've actually interviewed people for whom it was the real deal, where, yeah, you could identify this was not physical, but it was real. And then I would ask them questions about their past occult involvement. And sometimes they would say, yeah, I've never been involved in the occult, but I discovered close relatives of theirs were. And the demons can work through your close relatives. This is why when King David took the throne 3,000 years ago in Judea, he confessed the sins of his parents to the Lord in order to break that link, that possible occult link. So yeah, I have a chapter in this book on how to close the doors that you might have and your close relatives might have. If you do that, the UFO encounters will go away.
Thanks so much for being with us today, Dr. Ross.
Oh, you're very welcome. My pleasure.
Well, we all know that people have different personalities, but do we know to what extent this can impact marital relationships? And perhaps more controversially, there are gender differences which can also impact marriage. Joining us to discuss this is Brent Taylor. He is a Lethbridge marriage coach and the author of His, Hers, Greatest Need. Of course, his and hers with a Z or a Z, which is an interesting way to spell that. Brent, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you. It's again, it's an honor and it's a privilege to be here, and thank you.
Of course. So first of all, can you briefly share a little bit about what you do to help couples improve their relationships?
Right. Well, the book started out with discovering, and what I share is his and hers greatest need, which you can find in here. And then the single biggest reason why marriages break down, how to build them up. And again, the greatest way a husband loves his wife and the greatest way a wife loves her husband. Those are 4 key components that I share with them when I first meet with them or I do an introduction session. And that is the big aha. After that, I get into the program that I coach them with, UCG, Understanding, Communication, and Giving. And in that, in the understanding component, there's personalities, love languages, gender, plus values and beliefs. And then in the communication, we do a safe talk, which involves appreciation, sensitive items, and apology talk. I've incorporated the 5 apology languages from Dr. Gary Chapman into the scripting of the safe talk. But the most important part that I work with them on is the giving, UC&G, Understanding, Communication, and Giving. Really, I got to get to the heart. Everybody thinks it's a mindset. And yes, that's true, but it's really a heart set and it boils down to our motive. So that's the biggest area that I get to, because most people don't realize how selfish we are.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, true. You need someone to almost hold up that mirror in front of you, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Now, of course, your book talks so much about the differences between men and women. So I guess before we get to talking about personality and gender differences, you write in your book that the greatest need for a husband is significance. Can you explain what you mean by husbands needing a significance?
Right. Well, kind of the best way I put it is every guy wants to be his wife's hero. Whether he's dating to be married or whether he is married, and whether he's 22 or whether he's 62. Sometimes it can subside and things like that, but every guy wants to be his wife's hero. And every woman, she wants to be fought for. So it kind of makes sense that he wants to be her hero and she wants to be fought for. And it's kind of romantic, but I always say when, God created man, he said it was good. And we created woman, he said, whoo, man. And it really is. It's a love story. And yeah, it's not all full of roses and the roses grow better through the manure together. But the reality is deep down inside, he wants to be her hero. He wants to be important to her. And men can have ego issues. Tell me one man that doesn't struggle with ego issues. That's rooted in his desire to be significant. But sometimes it can tip the teeter-totter, and confidence is one thing, but also humility and humbleness is another thing.
Mm-hmm. Where does that come from, do you think, that need of significance? I think we all have it, but you speak specifically to men.
Right. Now, women want to be significant as well. It's just not their deep core need. Hers is security, emotional and physical security. And, the man's is significance. It actually goes back to the book of Genesis. It goes back to the fall in the garden. And we kind of amped up our needs. We increased them because we wanted to be independent. We fell away. So there was actually a curse that said, cursed are you, you will toil the land all the days of your life. You can't work hard enough. Basically, he was saying, you want to be independent? I'm going to amp it up a little bit. Same thing with women. You want to be independent? I'm going to amp up your need for security. So it really comes down to that. But if you think about it, if a man's designed to be a provider and a protector, her need for security then falls into line with that protection. He wants to protect her. He was made to give his life for his wife. I use the Titanic. Even in the feminist world, I say, well, let's pretend we got the Titanic and the ship's going down and down and down and down, and you have co-captains instead of one captain. So you got man and woman, and everybody's jumping on lifeboats, and there's only one lifeboat left and room for one more person. Man's looking at woman, and who do you think is going to say, you take the last spot on the last lifeboat? It better be the man.
Mm-hmm.
And who do you think is going to accept the offer?
the woman.
And who do you think is going to have some tears going down her face for how much he loved her because he gave his life for his wife? And so, so that's really the litmus test, that he wants to be her protector, her provider. He wants to fight for her, and she wants to be fought for. So it makes sense that he would want to be her hero, which ties into being significant. Yes, she wants to be significant too, but it's not as deep a core need.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now, of course, there are those who would argue that men and women are the same, that there's no real difference. But you, of course, would say that there really are differences in the way our brains are hardwired. Can you explain some of these gender differences?
Well, generally speaking, and it happens biologically at birth or at a very, very young age, boys and girls are wired basically the same. But at a very young age, we're talking weeks old, or even, I don't know if it's might be in the womb, but I think it's after, testosterone hits the brain of a little boy. Massive amounts of testosterone hit a little boy. But in the early stages, they're generally the same. The communication, the verbal interaction, when you're changing their diapers and you're smiling and goo goo gaga over your children, and there's a connection. But because of the testosterone that hits the male brain, it decreases his connection of that verbal, relational, emotional connection, and it increases his tendency for action and aggression. If he's going to be a provider, if he's going to sacrifice his life, then he has to be willing to put himself at the front end of the battle lines to protect his wife and children. That testosterone is necessary. And here's proof. Lots of ladies think, well, my husband just wants me for sex, or they feel used. Well, actually, man was designed to love his wife. A lot of people think God gave man, woman to be his helpmate. Yes, there's merit there, but largely God is a giver of love, and man was made to give his wife love. And he just happens, because of the testosterone, he happens to love physically. Women tend to connect emotionally first before the physical kicks in. They want to trust. They want to feel secure. They want to know things are looked after. They want to know that she can give herself to him. But men come alive physically first, then the emotional, and then women are kind of the opposite. So I would say God's got a sense of humor because they're kind of missing each other here. So there's a hardwired difference between male and female. Another one is, I believe it's the right side of the brain. The little boy's brain is more wired for spatial, how objects move in space. How many women, you're trying to find a house, you're going to go visit some friends, and you think, well, my husband should just ask for directions. And he goes, no. They think, well, he's got ego issues. Maybe a little bit, but also men actually enjoy figuring out how to get from here to here, how things move in space. They want to figure that out. So there's another difference. Ladies, they just want to get from point A to point B. And so there's a spatial arrangement. Ladies tend to be more relational, and guys tend to be more spatial.
Mm-hmm. And want to fix the problems too. So we all know that men like to fix problems, and women just want their husbands to listen to their problems.
Right, because I say, guys, listen with your eyes and zip your lip. And because most men think, why are we talking unless we're solving a problem? And women think, why are we solving a problem? I just want you to listen. Because men love solvingly. So when a husband is solving his wife's problem, he's actually loving her. But she doesn't see it as that. She takes it critically, because here's what most women don't realize. And I just said it to a couple the other day, and immediately she acknowledged and smiled. And I said, she wants to know that he cares about how she feels about the problem. So you don't need to fix the problem. You need to care how she feels about the problem, because she's looking for the heart connection. She's looking, again, for that security. She wants to know that you care about how she feels. So there's a definite difference. Whereas guys say, why don't we just solve the problem? Then you won't have those feelings anymore.
Yeah. It's funny how so many times couples have such different personalities. So like they say opposites seem to attract, right? But apparently the personality differences can cause some serious clashes. So is it important or worthwhile to take time to do a personality analysis in order to understand how we see the world as compared to our spouse?
The short answer is yes. It's definitely worthwhile. When I had my company called BCT Structures, I had to lose my $50 million company. Largest plant built in manufacturing. I know I'm bragging. See, there's the guy's ego. and I had to lose it all. But even when I had it and I was going through all my struggles in life, and I'm a bit of a softie, I wanted this for our employees, not too much of this and none of this. How do we get here? So all of the staff that I hired, I used the personality, and I used True Colors. I didn't know True Colors back then, but I was using this 8 questions. It's now 10 questions that I've expanded it to. It's all over North America. They use it in the school systems. And it's the simplest to use because in the color code of blue, green, orange, and gold, you can tell who's the more sensitive or romantic one, which is important when you're coaching couples. They also have cards for children. They can quickly arrange it in 10 seconds. They know who they are. Personalities is important because blue is sensitive, relational, green is analytical, orange is spontaneity, fun, go for it, and gold is organized and structured. They have their upside and their downside. It's very, very important. Goals are organized and structured and loyal, but they're bossy, controlling, and inflexible. Blues are sensitive, compassionate, and caring. They're a bleeding heart and needy and an enabler. So we need to know our greatest strengths to be our greatest weaknesses. So what I do for couples, and I combine their personalities with their love languages. So they get their score on their love languages. So words of affirmation, quality time, receiving gifts, acts of service, and physical touch. So when you combine those two with the gender, you have a very powerful profile. And I share with the husband and wife how they individually tick, but also where they connect and where they disconnect. When you can understand each other, you can go, oh, that's why they behave and think the way they do. They have a different set of lenses. We also get into upbringing. So our upbringing is a huge manifestation. So it is very wise to understand. Most people think they're going to get it through osmosis. No, you need to learn.
Right. So when spouses do have those conflicting personality types, what advice do you have to adjust for this to make things work? Is there anything people need to adjust in their, I don't know, I don't want to say personality, but I guess, yeah.
Good question. The adjustment first comes from understanding. I think there's a huge wall that starts to come down when we understand the way each other thinks and feels and perspectives. So at least you can start to understand it. You don't just criticize or get mad at them for not seeing it my way. That's important. The other thing we do get to, which is huge, is because, as I shared with you before, when we cross our arms, that becomes the comfortable way. But if I was to reverse it, most people struggle to reverse it. That can be comfortable. So it's what we get used to. There's only 2 motives in the world. It's either love or selfishness. It's either what you can do for me or what can I do for you. Most of the time, Christian or non-Christian, we're focused on me, 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 me. We don't know it. That's our number one problem in the world. We're addicted to self. And we're comfortable with it. So we're habitually practiced at it. So I can get to the head and the heart, but if we don't get to the habit, so not only understanding, which helps, then helping them have a communication tool, which I call Safe Talk, but ultimately we need to start practicing giving. And here's the cool part. When we're giving, we're living. Why does it take a high river flood, a Fort McMurray fire, California fire, a Haiti, Japan, and New Orleans? Why does it take a disaster for us to get off our selfish couches and go give, expecting nothing in return? Expecting nothing in return. So if I can help husband and wife understand each other and they can start giving, expecting nothing in return. And I say, husbands, when you treat your wife right, she blossoms. Can you imagine if husbands and wives started putting the other one first? Because the true definition of love is self-giving, not self-seeking. Love is me last and you first.
Yeah, what a wonderful world it would be.
That's why Jesus came to give his life. He wanted to show us that, not only save us, but show us that love is me last, not me. And when you start to put the other first, when you're giving, you come alive, and the gift is in the giving. So once we realize I was going in the wrong direction.
Right.
And the more I chase the me race, the more empty.
Brent, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your wisdom. We appreciate having you on again.
Thank you. And I just want to have that little quote I shared before. I said, you know, if we can put love back in the marriage, we can put love back in the world.
There you go, right there. Brent Taylor is a Lethbridge marriage coach and the author of His, Hers, Greatest Need. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.